Welcome along, Monday Night Rugby coming at you. So, as is the way now, the full Monday Night Rugby is available to podcast. It's very much there and free and waiting for you. Just search OTB Rugby and you will find Monday Night Rugby. Tonight it's Ruaidhri O'Connor and Fiona Hayes. We talked about a whole host of things. We'll just give you a little taster. So, Leinster's winning Ospreys against Ospreys, away to Ospreys, came up naturally enough, and the guys gave their thoughts on that. For Leinster away to Ospreys, 24-19, the winning scoreline. Leinster not all that accustomed to being in trouble. I guess the Ulster match at the RDS jumps to mind a couple of weeks back, but 2 tries in 4 minutes in the second half brought them back from big trouble. They were 10 points down early in the first quarter, Rory. On the hour mark, they were still down by 6, but there was no real sense of panic off the performance either. Hugo Keenan and Jimmy O'Brien scored those 2 tries, and it's a familiar ending.
Yeah, I think the way they've managed their team over the last 3 weeks has just been an advertisement for having someone in the Leo Cullen role who can basically strategise long term and pick teams week to week to week. So he's basically had these internationals in this area 1 week, and then he's had a different set, and then he picks a few of them off the bench this week, and you know, it's paid off for him. And look, he has the strongest squad in the competition, and the Sharks, he doesn't have to deal with the 40 hours of travel that the likes of the Sharks have to. He's a much simpler, you know, getting to Swansea is a much more simpler equation. But it's a masterclass in how you manage the particular set of circumstances that present themselves to them. And it's not something, I think, it looks easy because they're operating at such a high level, but I do think it's worthy of some comment. You know, this was one that could easily, like, you know, Ospreys picked a very, very strong team. They'd half the Welsh team playing and a couple of, you know, Lions starting, and they were on top at the scrum and they were on top in various areas. And Leinster, yeah, they've won. They're pretty much home and hosed in their position at the top of the table. That's one. You have Europe next week. You haven't lost a game all season. 20 minutes to go, you could say, look, let's try and get a bonus point out of this. You know, let's just, you know, sack this one off. But they just went up. They went up a little bit like the Ulster game in the RDS a couple of weeks ago. They just kept putting just going up a gear, and there was one moment, I think 4 or 5 minutes to go, there was a kick, kind of, you know, a fairly routine kick put through, with 4 Leinster backs hair through and put unbelievable pressure on the Ospreys player, and it was a big play. I think it led to one of the tries, but it just spoke to the attitude of those players, all internationals. You think about Jordan Larmour playing in that game, he wants that Ireland jersey. Jimmy O'Brien's put back in after Larmour steps about 10 players in the previous week, he wants that jersey. Hugo Keenan's looking at going, well, I can't, you know, I've barely played this season, I can't drop my standards, and it just works so well. It's really, really impressive, and it was one of the more entertaining Leinster games of the season because in difficult conditions away from home they were forced to come from behind and win it. They've won a lot of games in a lot of different ways this year, and you know, it's a very impressive winning run because of that, and they haven't always had their best team out there, but at the end of the day they're able to go with a kind of a mix and match team and win away in Swansea. It's very, very impressive, and it just stands them in incredible stead. And the news coming out that night was that Sexton's going to be okay for the Six Nations, which means we got a good bit of chat out of it last week, but it's not going to happen in the end.
For what feels like the 1000th Six Nations in a row, Johnny Sexton will just about make the first game and win his fitness battle. He tends
that way. But like Ross Byrne looked really good when he came off the bench. Harry Byrne started, but you know, he just needs a run. You couldn't judge him on that one game against the Ospreys. But I thought, like, every time I see Ross Byrne now, I'm more assured by him. He just gives you such assurance, and his place in the pecking order when the squad comes out maybe next week, I think, is going to be very interesting.
Isn't the issue with Ross Byrne for a World Cup squad that if Sexton's certainly going, obviously Fiona, and Joey Carberry is second, and if they're bringing 3, the third name needs to be utility player, and Ross Byrne is not, therefore?
Yeah, it would be looking like that, and I suppose you have Crowley in the mix there, who's played a bit at full back and has played in the centre now at 12 as well, so he has that added to his thing. But you know, in discussion on that Ross Byrne, you also want someone, you know, if you get an injury, someone reassured on the bench, especially in the kicking game, especially from the tee, and he's just proved that time and time again with Ireland that when he's needed to come on and get you 3 points under a pressured situation, he seems the most relaxed and calm guy to do it. So they will be taking all that into consideration.
The Leinster team, by the way, we've mentioned most of the names, so it was Keenan, Larmour in one wing, Jimmy O'Brien the other, Osborne and Nagatai in the centre, Harry Byrne, Cormac Foley at 10 and 9, and then it was Healy, Sheehan racking up the minutes, Alatoa in the front row, Maloney was in the second row, the likes of Ruddock, Scott Penny, Jack Conan back row. So it was that kind of Leinster team. Fiona, what would you say of the comeback?
Yeah, it was really good. You know what's a killer for Ospreys when I was watching the game is that they were so defensively good around that 60-minute mark when they were up. You know, they were up 6 points, and you just thought Leinster had a few errors and they were getting dominant tackles. Ospreys were driving them back, and there's nothing worse. It was an absolute piece of brilliance from Hugo Keenan to just come in, you know, from that blind side and get himself in, and he spotted that there was a sub hooker just after coming on from Ospreys and found a gap between him and the winger. So look, they're absolutely clinical. They always find a way, and I think with Ospreys, with that, they were able to get back up the pitch again. But Jimmy O'Brien was lethal again. I feel like exactly what Rory was saying earlier. There's so much competition, so these guys know, the likes of Larmer, O'Brien, Keenan, even, you know, in the back row you have Conan and whoever's there, Deegan. They're constantly fighting to try and get on that World Cup squad, and Leinster have that kind of I suppose have that squad together where they're pushing one another because there's such serious competition. I suppose one of the aspects that would have disappointed me, and I'm sure they will look at, is I really thought, you know, there was a lot of talk around Furlong, and if he's not there, you know, that Leinster scrum, especially against the big French packs, can come under pressure. And I was really watching Ala Toa this season, and I thought he'd really done well, and he was getting his height correct and being dominant, and this Ospreys pack absolutely killed him. You know, obviously he had a few changes in with him, but it's definitely, I've never seen in a couple of those scrums, I've never seen a Leinster pack go back at the rate of knots like they did. Obviously just a height issue and maybe the second row's bail, but it's definitely something that Cullen and, you know, the coaching staff will have to look at that, because if they don't have Furlong there, they need to have a tight head that can absolutely anchor that scrum.
Okay, interesting. So what's his issue when you say height?
Yeah, I obviously the Ospreys pack were, you know, they're around a long time, a lot of caps between these guys. I felt like when you look at scrums, especially that one where they went back, I suppose about 3, 4, 5 meters instantly, you have to look at, he absolutely let, you know, the loose head, the Ospreys loose head get underneath him, and there was a split in the second rows and they went back. You know, I just felt like they weren't getting as low as I've seen them as a pack together, whether that was an influence from different second rows coming in between them, behind them. Maybe it was, you know, that mixture of, you know, you had Milne coming on as well for the last few minutes who got blasted back as well. But
my sense from you is if Furlong was there, regardless of the second row, it would have been a different story.
I don't know. It could be he switched off. There was definitely 2 or 3 scrums where I rewound it and I look back at his body position and he just seemed to get absolutely caught initially on the hit and was caught too high and he was getting blasted back. I think with Furlong, he obviously sets himself, he takes a breather, he has these motions to win there. Now, it can happen in any game, you can't say that, but it was just, I hadn't seen a Leinster scrum come under that much pressure in a long time.
Furlong. Yeah, sorry. I was just going to say Tyke Furlong, akin to Johnny Sexton in the latest Leinster dispatch, likely to be deemed fit for Ireland's opener against Wales. He's only played twice this season. There was the recent ankle injury and now a minor setback in training, I think a calf problem, and he's had his calf problems before, Rory. So yeah, he's one of those players that, he tends to, a bit like Sexton, make it for most of the big games, but has his troubles around them.
He's essentially a contracted player, so I think look, Fiona's touched on it, he is so important. He's one of the kind of golden trio or 4 players who Ireland can't afford to lose. I mean, I find it really interesting that Dan Sheehan's playing so many minutes this season and Andrew Porter's playing a lot of minutes, and they're really important as well. But Furlong in particular is crucial to the way Ireland go, and I think in a World Cup year they're being uber cautious. But there was a lower back problem. It's all, again, like a lot of these injuries, there's always a little bit opaque around what exactly is going on. There's been there's been calf, there's been a bit of lower back. But when it comes to the crunch, he's generally there when the important games are there to be played. And Leinster, I think there are a few, and Leinster both feel they can get by without him. Even Cian Healy's played a bit of tight head this season. And Ala Toa, I think, has done very well across this season, and I think there's been a lot of talk within Leinster about how the first year he learned about Northern Hemisphere scrummaging. This year he's putting it into practice. I wonder, and I just thought of it there when Fiona was talking, and the 4 Irish provinces struggled. We are seeing faster sets of scrums at this after the changes before Christmas. So World Rugby have said that you've got 30 seconds to set. So that's a massive change to the way scrums are put together. Big change for front rows. Maybe players like Ala Toa, maybe others, just had that 90 seconds that they all took as part of their process. So you need to change your process and adapt a little bit. The kickers are going to have to learn to kick a little bit quicker as well. So maybe there's a little bit of it feeding into that. He was also up against the Wales, pretty much the Wales front row, which was a bigger challenge. And Jason Jenkins was a big signing for them in that tight head lock slot, and he wasn't there on Saturday.
There you are. That was a taster of Monday Night Rugby. It was about a 40-minute chat in total. Lots of good stuff in it. Just go find the podcast, search OTB Rugby, and there you are. That was a taster of Monday Night Rugby. It was about a 40-minute chat in total. Lots of good stuff in it. Just go find the podcast, search OTB Rugby, and you will find us there. Cheers.